I 100% believe in tours.
Yeah.
Because it's confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And if you come in and you realize, like I'm now realizing seeing this in person ain't for me, I'm glad you're doing it now, not later.
Yeah.
What's up?
What's up? So, today I kind of want to cover, I feel like it's something that shouldn't get forgotten, but it kind of does. But it's just like the shop in general. Like,
Okay.
all the different stages that we go through to build a van. So, like, what's the first process in the shop for building a van?
So we talking like build process, like
Yeah,
kind
the
of like
whole.
build, like physical, like
Yeah.
physical build process. All right, I'm gonna dive into that one. So units will come into the facility. Now with the move cargo,
Mm-hmm.
we bring in passengers and cargos.
Yeah.
They flow through the same process, but there are a couple asterisks to it.
Yeah.
When you pull a passenger in, you're bringing it in with full headliners, full seats, factory flooring, factory trim. So step one of build process is gut.
Yeah.
Gut it down, bring all the headliners down, bring all the plastic out. On a cargo, you do still have panels on the doors,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like lower down below. You still have a headliner for your front area, so there is still gutting
Yeah.
on a
There's still a
cargo.
demo process.
There's still a demo process, but it's nothing. It's nothing quite like a passenger. So that's step one. Once the unit is fully gutted, all the way down to bare sheet metal, then you could say that the pre-production process begins.
Mm-hmm.
So in pre-production, we insulate, we wire, and then we prep certain components.
Mm-hmm.
So that will consist of all your wiring for the entire system. You're going to get all of your ceiling, wall, and on a move, you will not get your floor insulation yet.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, take that back. Actually all models you do not insulate the floors until build process in production. And the other thing that we do is air vents, ACs, roof prep,
Mm-hmm.
plus S-bar installs all happen at that time too.
Okay.
Now, when I say wiring, typically that means just raw wiring, no outlets connected up yet, nothing really connected yet.
Yeah.
The one thing that they will do in pre-production is they will go ahead and run that under chassis cable that goes for your power system.
Okay.
So that's really pre-production. Now, with the move models, we do flare spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So we will bring the units in. If it's a cargo, it goes straight to appointment to get the flares installed before it ever enters our facility. And if it is a passenger, we actually have to gut the unit before we pull the glass and do the flares.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a tricky thing there, but that's really gut / pre-production all in kind of a fold.
Yeah.
So that is what we used to classify as our first 30% of build.
Yeah.
Obviously, as builds get bigger, that 30 is not really 30 anymore. It's more like 20, or on some of our builds are so big, I'd say it's more like 10.
Yeah.
But that's all pre. And then at that point, so they are in their own area. So all supplies just for that stage. So in our build process, our vans also just don't stay in one bay during their whole process. They go into a spot and they either leave the facility and will come back in at a later point.
Mm-hmm.
They leave for appointments, come back in, or they will simply just shift down to a production bay.
Mm-hmm.
So now we get into production. So in the production line, you're going to get your power system hooked up, installed, all your connections, your kit, your lighting, outlets. Basically, the entire unit is going to get assembled.
Yeah.
And that's where I will pause, because while you have the unit going through build process, behind the scenes you've got assembly.
Mm-hmm.
That's happening simultaneously ahead of when it's needed.
Yeah. And that's kind of taking place outside of the van is what you're
Correct.
saying? Yeah.
Yep. So nothing's really... We take raw components and we assemble them into composites, into structures, power system, boxes, walls, ceilings. Everything's done exterior-wise.
Yeah.
And then once a unit actually gets into production, then we bring all the components of it together.
Yeah.
And that is where I would say, that's where I would say the biggest difference, maybe, with us amongst a lot of others is that, we just don't have a unit in a bay building for, gosh, I don't know, 5 or 6 months.
Yeah.
Just continually trying to craft one unit.
Yeah.
We don't have that.
Yeah.
And so, so that's where I would just say our production spot is where the unit comes to life and everything is actually put in it.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about build process, there's other processes working elsewhere to bring the final product together.
Yeah.
And that's what allows us to turn a unit in a bay and back out of a bay in a week.
Yeah.
And, that would be kind of the build process. And then from there, I can kind of get down to nitty gritty. But is that
Yeah,
answering?
that was kind of what I was looking for. And then, yeah, to get to the nitty gritty, there's obviously a lot of stations that are helping create the components that we are building from the outside of the van, like cutting, T-track and things like other stations that aren't necessarily part of that assembly line of putting a van together.
Yeah, like we have a full fab room, CNCs, Waterjets, plasmas. We have that. We've got making harnesses, like so wire harnesses externally from the actual production line.
Yeah.
And so the production line really is assembly.
Yeah.
Like the supply wall for production compared to most, it's a pretty small wall.
Yeah.
But it's because that, this power box here has, I don't know, let's just say 200 components in it. Well, really, the power box is brought to the van fully assembled, minus like the batteries because of weight.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, everything's already assembled in it.
Yeah.
And so, it's kind of like all the things behind the scenes. When people tour, you get to see vans in these stages.
Yeah.
But you can look at vans and you're like, they're completely empty. Well, it's like, there's 10 people behind the curtain over here assembling stuff that you don't see.
Yeah, like 70% of your van is actually built. It's just not in the van yet.
Exactly. Well, and that's what makes us efficient and effective is because, and that's where it gets into, because of the things we're talking about, that's where we've gotten, I've had people ask me like, hey, I put it in a custom order. How are you building inventory builds?
Yeah.
Well, it's not because of the physical space on the production line that allows that. It's that when we were assembling somebody else's custom build, we just duplicated it 3 times on the bench.
Yeah.
And so it's, we've kind of got that as pushback a little bit before, where people have said, I custom ordered. It's like, well, but when we build an inventory, it doesn't really matter what's in it as long as it's complete.
Yeah.
When you build custom, we got to make sure that you get the right lights, you get the right power, you get the right floor, right walls. And so on the production line, you wouldn't know any different. Again, behind the scenes of being able to supply those parts in composites and built units to the production line, well, now it's a totally different beast. And so, and then after production, you get into post. You get into post production, and once you reach post production, it is it's just interesting. We get clever with things. You start to see the add-ons. You start to see new ideas come to life. Kind of all secondary things that aren't standard to the production line.
Yeah.
Or maybe we just haven't standardized.
Yeah.
It's kind of a two-parter. And so you kind of have that two-part approach. Well, along with that, in this whole notion before delivery day, we also have our outside contracts / people who work for us. So we wrap. We do full vinyl wrap after build is produced. We do lift kits, bumpers, tires, wheels, all that's through third party. It's all dealer network set up. And so, that happens after the build. Basically, after we sign off on the unit, it goes and gets all those
Yeah.
additionals before delivery day.
Mm-hmm.
And so whenever you leave, financed unit, cash buy, or whatever the case might be, you get to leave with complete package.
Yeah.
And so, but as far as the process goes, it's not. We're not taking bare bone chassis and lifting them before we put weight in them.
Yeah.
We're doing the opposite.
Yeah.
Or at least trying to. Sometimes our process has, required us just because of rainstorms, windstorms. You just outside effects we can't control.
Yeah. Acts of God.
Yeah. But for the most part, unit comes in, it gets gutted, it gets prepped to about, 30% is probably realistic still.
Yeah.
And then it moves right down to production. It gets everything so we send out a email to the team that initiates that whole process. Yeah. And at that point, they start assembling everything. They start allocating. And so whenever that really starts to take hold, you start to see a name get put on a power box. You start to see all these things that have kind of been pre-built start get assigned.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, carts are heading to a van, stuff's going in.
Yeah.
And it really is amazing to me. I still get taken back sometimes because, building the first Vandoit, I know the process that I went through to build the first.
Yeah.
And then I look just, call it, 7 years later, not even quite that. And I look at how quickly a van goes from bare bone chassis to fully built.
Yeah.
And, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild.
When I first got back, I just did like a week. And like seeing a van that looked completely empty and then all of a sudden it's being delivered like 2 weeks later or whatever it was. But like that whole process is wild because of how much of it does get done outside the van. You realize how easy it is for them to just, it's not always easy, but like how rinse repeat it is to like keep doing the same process over and over
right
again.
Yeah. Well, and then just consistency falls into place.
Yeah.
It is extremely taxing to, I think sometimes people look at it and they say, well, building a copy repeat product, that's got to be really nice and really easy. No, it's actually the opposite. It's way easier to build custom because you're just crafting it. Yeah. You're just taking this board and you're going to trim it down.
Yeah.
But whenever you got to make a machine, duplicate the same parts and the bars got to be identical for it to match, and assembly has to go smooth, and you get a cog in the wheel in an assembly scenario. It hurts.
Yeah.
When it's custom, cut a new one. And so it is a daunting thing to want to, produce what we do, but also it's extremely rewarding as well. Yeah. So it is the grind of getting it to that process. And it takes time.
Yeah. One thing that to add on to the whole shop idea is we do offer tours. So what I would think it'd be very beneficial for somebody who's interested in buying a van to actually come see the facility and see how the bread is made or whatever the cheese is made. Like,
yeah, beer's brewed.
Yeah.
Wine stepped on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I think I think getting to go in and actually get to meet some of the people that build them. You get to watch them build them. You get to watch them build others. It's tangible. We're here. I just think you just get to put a face with a name. You get to actually see what you're buying.
Yeah.
You get to touch, feel it. I 100% believe in tours.
Yeah.
Because it's confidence. And if you come in and you realize, I'm now realizing seeing this in person ain't for me, I'm glad you're doing it now, not later.
Yeah.
And so
it's saving everyone headaches.
Exactly. So I'm all for it. I'm a huge believer. I'm a huge advocate for it. And we're unique. What we do, we're unique.
Yeah.
And you got to have a certain, thought to what you're doing. Like you gotta, people who look at what we do and, don't call our vans homey or whatever, it's again, you gotta see the functionality in it to really love it. And if you do, and you come in here, you're gonna fall in love.
Yeah.
Or you're gonna figure out, hey, I do care more about that countertop
Yeah.
than I maybe should, but I do.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's why it's like, go to an open house to look at some different homes before you buy one.
Yeah.
That's just a true reality.
Yeah.
We want confidence that when you buy, not oh man, I'm not sure if I'm gonna like this.
Yeah.
And that's where the tours come into play, because you do. I mean, we're in a van inside the facility that's currently getting some demo done right now to expand production. But you go back to the other side of the building where active production is currently happening. I mean, everything I just talked through, you get to see it all.
Yeah.
So minus the lift part, you don't get to see them get lifts put on. So
you get to see them lifted.
Yeah, you get to see them like they show back up, and you're like, "Ooh, that's different."
Yeah. Yeah, I saw one that's out there that doesn't quite have the tires on, so it looks like it's really jacked up, but it's got the standard stock Ford tires on it, so it looks like it's got a 12-inch lift on it, but it's not that extreme.
No, nope.
Cool. Well, yeah, come see the shop. Come see how the cheese is made.
Just come see how the cheese is made. Thanks, Lane.
Yep.